The crew of the Zephyr's Claw, a small pirate vessel operating on the fringes of known space, prided themselves on their cunning and efficiency. Aboard the ship were a mix of alien species, each skilled in their own particular brand of troublemaking. They had raided countless cargo ships, seized valuable resources, and made a name for themselves as merciless marauders. But their luck took an unexpected turn when they decided to raid a human vessel. It started like any other job. The human freighter, Artemis III, was drifting through a quiet sector of space, ripe for the taking. The Zephyr's Claw decloaked and latched onto the freighter's hull, breaching its airlock with surgical precision. The crew, expecting the usual frightened surrender, stormed the ship with weapons raised, only to find it strangely quiet. "No resistance," growled Krellner, the hulking Dracian who served as the ship's enforcer. His thick, armored hide made him an intimidating presence. "This feels wrong." His captain, a lithe and calculating Slanvian named Tyrix, dismissed his concerns with a flick of her clawed hand. "Humans are soft. They'll probably be cowering in the hold. Sweep the ship and bring back anyone alive. We'll ransom them." The crew spread out, their bootsteps echoing through the freighter's empty corridors. They eventually found a lone human in the ship's cargo bay. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strangely calm, seated on a crate with his arms crossed as though waiting for them. "Hands up!" barked Krellner, aiming his plasma rifle. The human raised an eyebrow. "Really? You break into my ship, and that's your opening line? No, hello? No, how are you doing today?" Krellner snarled, stepping forward. "Do you have a death wish, human?" The man smirked. "Not particularly. But I'd rethink your choices if I were you." Tyrix arrived then, her eyes narrowing at the human. "You'll come with us. Resist, and I'll have Krellner make an example of you." To her surprise, the human didn't resist. He stood, stretching casually, and walked toward them. "Fine. Lead the way. But don't say I didn't warn you." That should have been their first clue. Humans, Tyrix thought, were supposed to beg and plead when threatened. But this one walked onto their ship as though he were a guest rather than a prisoner. Once aboard the Zephyr's Claw, they locked him in the brig. The crew gathered in the galley to celebrate their haul. The freighter had carried valuable medical supplies that would fetch a high price on the black market, and the human would undoubtedly bring in a hefty ransom. "You think his people will pay for him?" one of the crew asked, a wiry insectoid named Vrex. "Humans always pay," Tyrix replied confidently. "They value life above all else." But their celebration was short-lived. The trouble started when the lights flickered. At first, they assumed it was a power fluctuation, an issue not uncommon on their aging ship. But then the gravity field destabilized, sending unsecured objects floating momentarily before slamming back to the floor. "What's going on?" Tyrix demanded. The crew scrambled to the control room, only to find that the ship systems were acting erratically. Doors were locking and unlocking at random, and the engines began to cycle down without any command. "It's like the ship's possessed," Vrex chittered, his mandibles clicking nervously. Tyrix's eyes narrowed. "The human." They raced to the brig, only to find the cell door open and the human gone. Krellner growled in frustration, slamming his massive fist against the wall. "He couldn't have gotten far," Tyrix hissed. "Find him." The crew searched every inch of the ship, their tension mounting with every passing moment. The human, however, seemed to have vanished. Meanwhile, the ship's malfunctions grew worse. Life support systems began to fail in certain sections, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Finally, the crew found him in engineering, casually leaning against the main console. He was sipping a mug of something hot, likely scavenged from their galley, and watching their approach with amusement. "What did you do to our ship?" Tyrix snarled, drawing her weapon. The human sipped his drink, unconcerned. "Your ship? Oh, I'm just having a little fun. Nice system you've got here, by the way. A bit outdated, but nothing I couldn't figure out in a few minutes." "You hacked it?" Vrex screeched. "Impossible." "No, human." "Not impossible," the human interrupted. "It's actually pretty simple. You left your control protocols wide open. I mean, come on, who doesn't secure their neural core?" Krellner lunged at him, but before he could reach the human, the ship's artificial gravity suddenly increased, slamming the Dracian to the floor. The human didn't even flinch. "Careful," he said, his tone almost mocking. "I wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." Tyrix stared at him, a mix of fury and disbelief. "What do you want?" The human set his mug down and leaned forward. "First, I want you to understand something. You didn't take me hostage. I let you. And second, you're going to take me back to my ship, return everything you stole, and then leave this sector. Permanently." "And why," Tyrix growled, "would we do that?" The human smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because if you don't, I'll vent your atmosphere, lock your engines, and broadcast your location to every Concordance patrol in the system. You'll be spaced or arrested within the hour. Your choice." The crew stared at him, stunned. No human they'd encountered before had been like this. Tyrix realized then that they'd made a grave mistake. Humans weren't just adaptable. They were dangerous. "Fine," she spat. "We'll do as you say." "Good choice." The human stepped back, the systems immediately returning to normal. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've had a long day." The crew returned the human to his ship and left the sector as ordered. For weeks afterward, the Zephyr's claw operated on the fringes of space, avoiding human vessels entirely. And though they never saw him again, the crew spoke in hushed tones about the man who had bested them without firing a shot. The human's name? Captain Daniel Hayes. And for the pirates of the Zephyr's claw, he was a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate a deathworlder. The Zephyr's claw limped away from the sector, its crew shaken and simmering with unspoken tension. Tyrix sat in her quarters, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy, her claws tapping a nervous rhythm on her desk. The humans weren't supposed to be like this. They were supposed to be fragile creatures of soft flesh and naive optimism, easily cowed by threats or violence. Captain Daniel Hayes had turned that assumption inside out, and in the process made her question everything she thought she knew about deathworlders. The crew wasn't faring much better. Krellner stomped through the corridors, his heavy steps echoing his frustration. Vrex scuttled nervously in and out of rooms, mumbling to himself about recalibrating the ship's defenses. Even the normally stoic engineer, Calyx, a towering reptilian Threxian, had taken to muttering darkly about those cursed humans while rechecking every system for signs of tampering. And yet, deep down, Tyrix knew the truth. Hayes hadn't just bested them, he had humiliated them. Worse, he had done it without breaking a sweat. Days passed, and the crew began to recover from their encounter. Tyrix issued strict orders: avoid all human vessels, no exceptions. The crew agreed, though resentment simmered beneath the surface. Krellner, in particular, bristled at the order. "We're pirates," he growled during one of their tense meetings. "Not cowards. We can't let one human ruin our reputation." "That one human," Tyrix shot back, "hacked our systems, crippled our ship, and held us hostage without lifting a finger. Do you want to run into someone worse?" Krellner grumbled but held his tongue. Even he couldn't deny the human skill, or the eerie calm with which he had executed his plan. But it wasn't long before the crew's resolve was tested. Weeks later, while lurking in the shadow of a massive asteroid belt, the Zephyr's claw intercepted a distress signal. The message came from a cargo ship under attack by raiders, an easy mark by all appearances. Tyrix hesitated, wary of another encounter with humans, but Krellner was adamant. "This is our chance to redeem ourselves," he argued. "No human tricks this time. We take what we need and leave." Reluctantly, Tyrix gave the order. The Zephyr's claw swooped in, its weapons blazing, scattering the smaller raider ships with ease. The cargo vessel, a bulky freighter, appeared helpless, its engines flickering as it drifted aimlessly. "Boarding teams ready," Tyrix commanded, her voice steady despite her unease. The crew stormed the freighter, weapons drawn, expecting frightened workers or automated defenses. What they found instead sent a chill through their ranks. The cargo bay was empty. No crates, no supplies, just an open expanse of metal floor. And in the center of it stood a single figure, Captain Daniel Hayes. He was wearing a sleek, black combat suit this time, its surface dotted with glowing blue circuitry. His expression was the same as before, calm, confident, and slightly amused. "Miss me?" he asked, tilting his head. The pirates froze, their weapons trained on him. Krellner stepped forward, his plasma rifle humming ominously. "This time, you're not on your ship," he growled. "No systems to hack, no tricks to play. You're ours." Hayes's smirk widened. "You think so?" The lights flickered, and a deep, mechanical hum filled the air. From the shadows of the cargo bay, drones emerged, sleek, spider-like machines with glowing red eyes and sharp, articulated limbs. They surrounded the pirates in seconds, their weapons primed and ready. "You see," Hayes continued, pacing slowly, "after our last little encounter, I thought it might be fun to set a trap. I figured you'd come sniffing around eventually, and here you are. Right on schedule." Tyrix's heart sank. This wasn't a random cargo vessel. It was bait, and they had walked right into it. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice tight with fear and anger. Hayes stopped in front of her, his gaze piercing. "What I want," he said slowly, "is for you to understand something. The galaxy is big, and humans? We're new to the game. But we didn't survive a death world by being easy targets. So here's the deal." He gestured, and the drones clicked ominously, their weapons humming. "You leave human ships alone. Permanently. You spread the word to every pirate, raider, and lowlife you know. Humans aren't prey. We're the hunters. And if I ever see the Zephyr's claw again, I won't be so forgiving." Krellner snarled, raising his weapon, but before he could fire, a drone leapt onto him, knocking the rifle from his hands. Hayes didn't flinch. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. Tyrix swallowed her pride and nodded. "We'll leave, and we'll spread the word." "Good." Hayes stepped back, his drones parting to create a path to the airlock. "Now get off my ship." The pirates didn't hesitate. They retreated to their shuttle, silent and humiliated. As the Zephyr's claw pulled away from the freighter, Tyrix stared at the viewscreen, her claws digging into the armrests of her chair. "Captain," Vrex whispered, his voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Tyrix exhaled slowly, her pride in tatters but her survival instincts intact. "We do what he said. And we stay as far away from humans as possible." In the days and weeks that followed, stories of the Zephyr's Claw's encounter spread across the galactic underworld. Pirates and raiders learned to steer clear of human ships, their fear outweighing their greed. And though Captain Daniel Hayes faded into the shadows, his message was clear. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and they wouldn't make that mistake again. The stories about Captain Daniel Hayes didn't just fade into the whispers of the galactic underworld, they grew. Like a wildfire, tales of the human who single-handedly dismantled a pirate cruise operation spread from one station to another, reaching ears far beyond the criminal networks. Some dismissed it as exaggerated legend, but others, especially those who had encountered humans before, believed every word. For the crew of the Zephyr's Claw, however, the experience left scars. Tyrix's command had become a shadow of its former self. Fear of crossing humans turned into paranoia, and paranoia turned into division. Krellner was the first to leave, his pride unable to bear the humiliation of being bested not once, but twice by a single man. Vrex followed shortly after, retreating to the relative safety of his homeworld. Tyrix clung to her dwindling crew, hoping to salvage what was left of her reputation. But the galaxy had a way of testing those on the brink. Months after their fateful encounter with Hayes, the Zephyr's Claw found itself stranded near the boundary of a little charted nebula. Their fuel reserves were nearly depleted, and their communications array was damaged after a skirmish with a rival pirate crew. Tyrix sat in her captain's chair, staring out at the swirling gases of the nebula, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. "Captain," Calyx growled from the engineering console, his reptilian voice as dry as ever. "We're picking up a signal. Weak, but it's there." "What kind of signal?" Tyrix asked, her voice flat. "It's human," he replied, the word heavy with implication. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Even mentioning humans was enough to set them on edge. Tyrix frowned, weighing her options. They were desperate, but the memory of Hayes's ultimatum still burned fresh in her mind. "Put it on screen," she ordered reluctantly. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human woman seated in what appeared to be a cramped cockpit. She had sharp, calculating eyes and an expression that was both professional and mildly amused. "This is Commander Elena Vega of the United Earth Fleet," the woman said. "We've detected your vessel drifting near the nebula. Do you require assistance?" Tyrix hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to cut the transmission and drift into the void if it meant avoiding another encounter with humans. But their situation was dire. And this time there was no trap, no Captain Hayes. Just a human offering help. "Yes," Tyrix said finally. "We're out of fuel and unable to repair our communications array. Assistance would be appreciated." Commander Vega nodded. "Understood. We'll tow you to the nearest Concordance refueling station. Stand by." The screen went dark, and the crew sat in stunned silence. Tyrix tapped her claws on the armrest, uneasy. "They're helping us?" Calyx muttered. "Why, humans are strange like that," Tyrix said, though she didn't believe her own words. Something about this felt too easy. Hours later, the Zephyr's Claw was secured to a human patrol ship, its system stabilized and its course set for a nearby station. Tyrix had expected silence from the humans, professional detachment as they went about their rescue. What she hadn't expected was an invitation to dine with their captain. When Tyrix entered the patrol ship's mess hall, she found Commander Vega waiting for her. The human captain was seated at a table with 2 trays of food, one human and one prepared for Slanvian physiology. "Captain Tyrix," Vega greeted her warmly. "Please, have a seat." Tyrix eyed her warily but complied. "I wasn't expecting hospitality." Vega smiled. Humans believe in treating others with respect, even if they've made questionable life choices. Tyrix bristled but bit back her retort. "Why help us at all? You must know who we are." "I do," Vega admitted, her expression softening. "But you're not the first pirate crew to find themselves on the wrong side of a deathworlder. Hayes has a reputation, you know." At the mention of Hayes, Tyrix stiffened. "So you know him?" Vega laughed lightly. "Oh, we all know him. Captain Hayes is. Let's just say he's an unconventional ambassador for humanity. He has his methods, but his goal is the same as mine, to show the galaxy that humans aren't to be underestimated." Tyrix frowned. By humiliating us? By surviving, Vega corrected. Humans have spent millennia clawing our way up from nothing on a world that constantly tried to kill us. It's not about proving we're better, it's about showing that we won't go down without a fight. Hayes just happens to enjoy making a point. The conversation shifted after that. Tyrix found herself grudgingly intrigued by Vega's perspective. The human captain spoke with a calm confidence that was less abrasive than Hayes's, but no less formidable. By the end of their meal, Tyrix began to see humans in a new light, not as prey, but as equals. When the Zephyr's claw was finally repaired and refueled, Vega offered them a parting piece of advice. "Piracy is a dangerous game," she said. "But if you're smart, you'll find a better way to survive. The galaxy is changing, Captain Tyrix. It's time to adapt." Tyrix didn't respond, but Vega's words stayed with her long after they parted ways. Back aboard her ship, she gathered her crew and made a decision. "We're done with piracy," she announced, her voice firm. "It's time we found a new path." The crew didn't argue. They were tired, broken, and ready for something, anything, different. Under Tyrix's leadership, the Zephyr's claw became a legitimate salvage operation, skirting the edges of lawful trade while avoiding any further run-ins with humans. As the years passed, Tyrix would occasionally hear stories of Captain Daniel Hayes and his exploits. Each tale was more outlandish than the last, but Tyrix knew better than to doubt them. Hayes wasn't just a man. He was a reminder of humanity's resilience and a warning to the galaxy. Underestimate a deathworlder at your peril. Years passed, and the galaxy continued to change in ways no one could have predicted. The once feared crew of the Zephyr's claw had settled into their new life as salvagers. They operated on the fringe of legality, scavenging wreckage from abandoned battlefields and derelict ships. It was a humbler existence, far from the power and notoriety they had once sought as pirates, but it was stable, and most importantly, it kept them far from the humans they now feared. Tyrix had grown older, her once sharp claws dulled by years of honest, if grueling, work. Her crew had dwindled too. Some had retired, others had gone their separate ways, but the core few who remained were loyal to her vision. The galaxy had little patience for small-time operators, and every day was a battle to stay afloat. But for the most part, they succeeded. Until the day a signal came through, a faint, garbled transmission emanating from deep within a restricted sector. The crew listened intently as it repeated on a loop, crackling through the static. "Unknown vessel, distress, requesting immediate assistance, life support failing." Tyrix felt a chill creep down her spine. The sector the signal originated from was notorious, an uncharted region littered with the wreckage of failed expeditions and pirate ambushes. Few ships dared to venture there, and those that did rarely returned. "It's a trap," Krellner, who had returned to the crew years ago, grunted. His voice was as rough as ever. "No sane captain sends out a distress signal from there." "Maybe," Tyrix replied, her eyes narrowing. "But if it's real, it could mean salvage rights. And if it's not," she let the words hang in the air. "We'll handle it." The crew exchanged uneasy glances but ultimately agreed. Their ship wasn't in the best shape, and a lucrative salvage haul could be the windfall they needed to keep it running for another few years. Tyrix set a course for the coordinates, her instincts sharp despite the years of relative quiet. The journey through the restricted sector was harrowing. The nebula that cloaked the region wreaked havoc on their navigation systems, and strange energy readings made it impossible to predict where hazards might arise. Still, they pressed on, the distress signal growing stronger with each passing hour. When they finally reached the source, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A massive ship, clearly human in design, floated in the void, its hull battered and scorched. It was unlike anything Tyrix had ever seen before. Sleek, angular, and bristling with weapons, It was a testament to humanity's growing presence in the galaxy. "By the stars," Vrex whispered, his mandibles clicking nervously. "What kind of ship is that?" "A warship," Krellner growled. "Or it used to be." Tyrix's eyes scanned the vessel, her mind racing. The ship was clearly heavily damaged, its engines cold and its lights flickering weakly. But it didn't appear abandoned. The distress signal was still active, and faint heat signatures suggested there were survivors aboard. "Prep the boarding team," she ordered. "We're going in." The Zephyr's claw docked cautiously, its crew armed and ready as they breached the derelict warship. The air inside was thin but breathable, and the corridors were eerily silent. Scorch marks lined the walls, and debris cluttered the floors, evidence of a fierce battle. As they made their way deeper into the ship, they found signs of life, faint traces of human activity. A half-eaten ration pack here, a recently recharged power cell there. But no people. "This doesn't feel right," Vrex muttered, his antennae twitching. "Where are they?" "They're here," Tyrix said, her voice low. "Stay sharp." They entered the bridge, a vast chamber dominated by a shattered view screen and rows of sparking consoles. And there, slumped in the captain's chair, was a lone human. His head was bowed, his dark hair matted with sweat, and his breathing was shallow. "It's a survivor," Krellner rumbled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Lower your guns," Tyrix snapped. She approached the man cautiously. "Human, can you hear me?" The man stirred, lifting his head to reveal familiar, piercing eyes. Tyrix's breath caught in her throat. "Captain Hayes," she whispered. The human smirked weakly. "Took you long enough." The crew froze, a wave of dread washing over them. Hayes, the man who had haunted their nightmares, the human who had humiliated them twice before, was here, vulnerable, stranded, but unmistakably dangerous. "What happened to your ship?" Tyrix demanded, struggling to keep her composure. "Ambush," Hayes said, his voice hoarse. "Pirates. They didn't like me very much." "Shocking," Krellner muttered under his breath. Hayes ignored him. "My crew, they didn't make it. It's just me now. Systems are failing. I didn't think anyone would answer the signal." Tyrix's mind raced. This was her chance to get even, to finally turn the tables on the man who had dismantled her crew's reputation. And yet, as she looked into his weary eyes, she hesitated. "I could leave you here," she said slowly, testing his reaction. "You could," Hayes agreed, his smirk returning. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because you're not a pirate anymore," he said simply. "You're better than that. And because if you do leave me, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering when I'll find you." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Tyrix clenched her fists, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Finally, she sighed. "Get him to the med bay," she ordered. Krellner balked. "Captain." "Now," she barked, her voice leaving no room for argument. As they carried Hayes back to the Zephyr's claw, Tyrix couldn't help but wonder if she was making a mistake. But deep down, she knew the truth. Hayes was right. She wasn't a pirate anymore. And whatever lay ahead, she would face it on her own terms. For better or worse, the galaxy wasn't done with Captain Daniel Hayes. And neither, it seemed, was she.